The morning sun filtered through the ancient oak trees surrounding Forest Lodge as King Charles III walked slowly along the familiar gravel path. His footsteps crunched softly on the fallen leaves, each sound echoing memories of decades spent at this cherished royal retreat. The king paused at the wooden gate, his weathered hands resting on the worn iron latch that had been touched by generations of royals before him. Forest Lodge had always been more than just another royal property. Nestled deep within the Crown estate, this modest yet elegant hunting lodge represented something precious to the royal family, a place where they could escape the formalities of palace life and simply be themselves. Charles remembered bringing William and Harry here as young boys, watching them chase rabbits through the undergrowth while Diana laughed from the porch steps. The lodge itself was a beautiful example of traditional English architecture, with its honey-colored stone walls and slate roof that had weathered countless storms. Ivy climbed gracefully up one side of the building, and the chimney released a gentle curl of smoke into the crisp autumn air. The surrounding woodland stretched for miles, providing the perfect sanctuary for wildlife and the royal family alike. As Charles approached the front door, he could hear voices from within. William and Catherine had arrived earlier that morning with their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis. The sound of children's laughter drifting through the windows brought a smile to the king's face. It was exactly this kind of joy that he wanted to preserve for future generations. Inside, Catherine was helping Charlotte arrange wildflowers they had picked during their morning walk, while William showed George how to properly stack firewood beside the stone hearth. Louis, ever the adventurous one, was peering out of the kitchen window trying to spot the red squirrels that frequently visited the bird feeder hanging from the nearby apple tree. The decision to formally award Forest Lodge to William and Catherine had not been made lightly. Charles had spent months considering the implications and discussing the matter with his closest advisors. This wasn't merely about transferring property ownership. It was about ensuring the continuation of family traditions and providing his son's family with the same precious refuge that had meant so much to him throughout his own life. The lodge represented everything Charles valued about the monarchy's relationship with the British countryside. Here, away from the cameras and crowds, the royal family could connect with nature, teach their children about conservation, and understand the land they were destined to serve. The organic gardens behind the lodge, which Charles had personally helped establish, provided fresh vegetables for the kitchen and served as a living classroom for the young princes and princess. William understood the significance of his father's gesture. Having grown up visiting Forest Lodge, he knew that this gift represented more than real estate. It was a symbol of trust, responsibility, and the passing of stewardship from one generation to the next. The property would become a place where George, Charlotte, and Louis could experience the same magical childhood moments that had shaped their father's character. Catherine, meanwhile, had already begun envisioning how they might use the lodge to continue Charles's environmental initiatives. Her passion for early childhood development could flourish here, where the children could learn about nature, sustainability, and the importance of preserving the countryside for future generations. The timing of this announcement was particularly meaningful. With Charles having recently ascended to the throne, the gesture signaled his confidence in William and Catherine's readiness to take on greater responsibilities within the royal family. It demonstrated his belief that they would honor the traditions associated with Forest Lodge, while creating new memories for their own children. As the family gathered around the lodge's large wooden dining table that evening, sharing a simple meal prepared with vegetables from the garden, Charles reflected on the wisdom of his decision. This wasn't just about property transfer. It was about preserving a way of life, maintaining family connections to the land, and ensuring that future monarchs would always have a place to retreat and remember what truly mattered. The golden light of sunset streamed through the lodge's diamond-paned windows, casting dancing shadows across the worn wooden floors. In this peaceful moment, surrounded by his son's happy family, Charles knew he had made the right choice. Forest Lodge would continue to serve its most important purpose, providing a sanctuary where royals could simply be a family, connected to the earth and to each other. The official announcement came on a crisp Tuesday morning in November, delivered through the traditional channels of Buckingham Palace. The brief statement, written in the formal language typical of royal declarations, barely hinted at the emotional significance behind the King's decision to grant Forest Lodge to the Prince and Princess of Wales. William received the news while reviewing his official schedule in his Kensington Palace study. His private secretary, a sharp-eyed woman who had served the royal family for over 2 decades, presented him with the formal documents bearing his father's seal. The papers were beautifully crafted, written on heavy cream paper with the royal coat of arms embossed at the top. But William's attention was drawn to the personal note tucked beneath the official documentation. Charles had written in his distinctive handwriting, explaining that Forest Lodge had always been intended for William and his family. The king shared memories of his own father, Prince Philip, teaching him to appreciate the natural world during their visits to the lodge. He expressed his hope that William would pass on these same values to George, Charlotte, and Louis, ensuring that the next generation would understand their role as stewards of the land. Catherine was in the middle of a royal engagement at a children's hospital when she received word of the announcement. Her lady-in-waiting discreetly informed her during a brief break between ward visits. Catherine's eyes lit up with genuine surprise and delight, though she maintained her composure as she continued meeting with young patients and their families. Inside, however, her mind was already racing with possibilities for how they could use Forest Lodge to benefit charitable causes close to her heart. The media response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Royal correspondents noted that this gesture represented a significant vote of confidence from the new king in his heir's readiness to assume greater responsibilities. Many commentators drew parallels to previous royal property transfers, explaining how such gifts traditionally signaled important transitions within the monarchy. At Forest Lodge itself, the longtime caretaker, Mrs. Henderson, received the news with tears of joy. She had worked at the property for over 30 years, watching William grow from a mischievous boy who loved climbing the old oak trees into a responsible father and future king. Mrs. Henderson knew every corner of the lodge, from the squeaky floorboard in the upstairs hallway to the best spots in the garden for picking berries. With the children, the practical implications of the transfer began to unfold in the days following the announcement. Royal household staff worked quietly behind the scenes to ensure a smooth transition of responsibility. Security arrangements were reviewed and updated, though the lodge's remote location and modest profile meant it required far less protection than the family's primary residences. Local residents in the nearby village welcomed the news enthusiastically. The royal family's presence at Forest Lodge had always been a source of quiet pride for the community. William and Catherine were well known for their unpretentious behavior during visits, often stopping at the village shop for supplies or chatting with locals during their walks through the countryside. The village pub, the Crown and Anchor, buzzed with conversation about the announcement. Elderly residents shared stories of encounters with various royals over the years, from spotting Prince Charles, examining rare wildflowers along the nature trails, to witnessing young William and Harry racing their bicycles down the country lanes with their protection. Officers trailing behind. Environmental groups praised the decision, knowing Charles's commitment to conservation and expecting William and Catherine to continue these efforts. The lodge's grounds included several important habitats for native wildlife, and the organic garden served as a model for sustainable living practices that the royal family actively promoted. Behind the formal announcement lay deeper family dynamics that the public could only glimpse. Charles's decision reflected his evolving relationship with William as they navigated the transition from father and son to king and heir. The gift of Forest Lodge represented Charles's recognition that William had matured into someone ready to preserve and protect the things that mattered most to their family legacy. For William, accepting stewardship of Forest Lodge meant embracing responsibilities that extended far beyond property ownership. He understood that he was becoming the guardian of a place that had shaped generations of his family, a sanctuary that would need to serve his own children and their descendants for decades to come. The announcement also highlighted the royal family's evolving approach to public service. Rather than simply inheriting properties and privileges, the younger generation was expected to actively use these resources to benefit society. Forest Lodge would become not just a private retreat, but a platform for advancing causes related to conservation, mental health, and childhood development. As news of the transfer spread internationally, royal watchers around the world recognized the symbolic importance of Charles's gesture. This wasn't merely about real estate. It was about the careful preparation of the next generation of royals and the preservation of traditions that connected the monarchy to the British countryside and its people. The first weekend after the official transfer, William and Catherine arrived at Forest Lodge with their 3 children, finally able to explore their new home, without the formality that had always accompanied previous visits. George, now old enough to understand the significance of the moment, walked through the rooms with newfound ownership, pointing out his favorite hiding spots and the window seat where he loved reading adventure stories. Charlotte immediately claimed the small sunroom overlooking the garden as her special place, dragging cushions and blankets to create a cozy corner where she could draw pictures of the wildlife she spotted outside. Louis, typically energetic, raced through the halls testing how his voice echoed in different rooms, delighting in the freedom to be as loud as he wanted in their own space. Catherine found herself drawn to the kitchen, a warm and welcoming room with copper pots hanging from wooden beams and herbs growing in terracotta pots along the windowsill. She could easily imagine preparing family meals here, teaching the children to bake bread, and hosting intimate gatherings with close friends away from the scrutiny of palace life. The kitchen felt real and lived in, unlike the grand formal spaces they typically inhabited. William spent time in his father's study, now officially his own, examining the books that lined the wooden shelves. Charles had left behind a carefully curated collection that reflected his interests in architecture, gardening, philosophy, and environmental science. Tucked between volumes on organic farming and wildlife conservation, William discovered handwritten notebooks documenting his father's observations about the changing seasons at Forest Lodge over the years. The grounds revealed new secrets as the family explored with fresh eyes. Behind the main lodge, they discovered a small greenhouse that Charles had used for starting seedlings and protecting tender plants during harsh winters. Inside, they found rows of clay pots filled with soil, wooden plant markers written in Charles's neat handwriting, and garden tools carefully arranged on weathered wooden shelves. The children were particularly fascinated by the workshop attached to the greenhouse, where Charles had spent countless hours crafting birdhouses and repairing garden furniture. George examined the hand tools with reverence, while Charlotte collected interesting pieces of wood and metal that caught her artistic eye. Louis was most interested in the workbench, pretending to fix imaginary projects while making elaborate sound effects. Mrs. Henderson, the longtime caretaker, proved invaluable during this transition period. She possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of Forest Lodge's quirks and hidden treasures. She showed Catherine the secret compartment in the pantry, where previous royals had hidden Christmas presents, and she taught William how to properly maintain the old boiler that heated the lodge during winter months. The first major challenge came when the family decided to host a small dinner party for close friends. Catherine wanted to test the lodge's entertaining capabilities while maintaining its informal atmosphere. She planned a menu featuring vegetables from the garden and invited 2 couples who had been longtime friends, people who knew them as William and Catherine, rather than as royal titles. Preparing for the dinner revealed both the charms and limitations of Forest Lodge. The kitchen, while beautiful, required Catherine to adapt her usual hosting style to work with older appliances and limited counter space. William found himself learning to build proper fires in the stone hearth, a skill his father had assumed he already possessed. The evening itself proved magical. Guests arrived as the sun was setting, driving down the winding lane past ancient trees whose branches created a natural canopy overhead. The informal setting allowed conversations to flow naturally, with children playing board games by the fire, while adults lingered over dinner, discussing everything from local politics to shared memories of university days. Charlotte surprised everyone by volunteering to show the guests her nature collection, carefully arranged on a table in the sunroom. She had spent the week gathering interesting leaves, unusual stones, and feathers discovered during family walks, creating detailed drawings and labels for each item. Her presentation revealed not only artistic talent, but also genuine curiosity about the natural world around Forest Lodge. George demonstrated remarkable maturity as he helped serve dessert and cleared dishes, understanding instinctively that this evening represented something special for his parents. His natural leadership abilities shone as he organized games for the younger guests, including Lewis and the visitors' children, ensuring everyone felt included in the festivities. The success of this first entertaining experience gave William and Catherine confidence that Forest Lodge could indeed serve multiple purposes. It would remain their family sanctuary, but it could also become a place where they could host meaningful gatherings that advanced their charitable work and strengthened relationships with people who shared their values. As the guests departed and the family settled around the dying fire, William reflected on how different this felt from their other residences. Here, surrounded by the sounds of settling wood and distant owls, they felt grounded in a way that grand palaces couldn't provide. The children fell asleep easily in their simple bedrooms, lulled by the peaceful sounds of the countryside. Catherine walked through the lodge one final time before bed, turning off lights and checking doors with the satisfaction of someone caring for her own home. This wasn't just another royal property to be maintained by staff. This was their place, where they would create memories and teach their children about responsibility, conservation, and the simple pleasures of country life. Spring brought new life to Forest Lodge, and with it came William and Catherine's first major project as the property's new stewards. Catherine had developed an ambitious plan to transform part of the grounds into an outdoor classroom, where children from local schools could learn about nature, conservation, and traditional countryside skills that were rapidly disappearing from modern life. The idea had emerged during one of their evening walks around the property. Catherine noticed how naturally her own children gravitated toward hands-on learning when they were at the lodge, building fairy houses from twigs and leaves, identifying different bird calls, or helping Mrs. Henderson tend the vegetable garden. She realized that Forest Lodge could serve a much larger purpose than simply providing a private retreat for their family. William initially expressed concerns about opening their sanctuary to outside groups, worried about security and privacy. However, Catherine's enthusiasm was infectious, and her detailed plans addressed his practical concerns while highlighting the enormous potential benefits. They could maintain family privacy by limiting programs to specific days and areas of the property, while creating meaningful opportunities for children who rarely experience the countryside. The project required careful coordination with multiple organizations. Catherine reached out to local primary schools, many of which served children from urban areas who had limited exposure to rural environments. She also contacted environmental education specialists and traditional craftspeople, who could teach skills like woodworking, organic gardening, and wildlife observation. Mrs. Henderson proved instrumental in bringing Catherine's vision to life. Her decades of experience managing the property meant she understood which areas could accommodate groups without disturbing the lodge's peaceful atmosphere. She suggested using the old stable block, which had been converted to storage years earlier, as a base for educational activities. The stable renovation became William's passion project. Working alongside local craftsmen, he learned traditional building techniques while modernizing the space for its new purpose. The work gave him deep satisfaction, using his hands to create something meaningful rather than simply cutting ribbons or making speeches. He installed large windows to flood the space with natural light and built sturdy wooden tables where children could work on projects. George, Charlotte, and Louis became enthusiastic assistants during the renovation process. George showed remarkable aptitude for measuring and planning, carefully checking that shelves were level and corners were square. Charlotte contributed artistic touches, painting colorful signs and decorating the space with her nature drawings. Louis appointed himself chief tool organizer, creating elaborate systems for storing hammers, screwdrivers, and paintbrushes. The first group of visiting children arrived on a bright May morning, 20 excited 8-year-olds from a London primary school who had never seen so much green space. Their teacher, Miss Roberts, had prepared them carefully for the visit, but nothing could have truly prepared them for the magic of Forest Lodge. Catherine met the group at the renovated stable, which they had named the Learning Lodge. She had dressed casually in jeans and a practical sweater, wanting the children to see her as a guide and fellow explorer, rather than as someone formal and distant. Her natural ease with children immediately put the group at rest, and within minutes they were chattering excitedly about everything they hoped to see and do. The morning program included a nature walk, led by William, who proved surprisingly skilled at spotting wildlife and explaining complex ecological concepts in terms children could understand. He showed them how to identify different types of trees by their leaves and bark, demonstrated how to track animal footprints in soft earth, and taught them to listen for the distinctive calls of various bird species. One particularly memorable moment came when the group discovered a family of baby rabbits sheltering beneath a fallen log. William quietly gathered the children in a circle, showing them how to observe wildlife without disturbing it. The children watched in fascination as the tiny rabbits eventually emerged to nibble grass nearby, completely unafraid of their gentle audience. Catherine led the afternoon session, teaching the children to plant seeds in small pots they could take home. She explained how plants grow, why some need more water than others, and how gardening connects people to the natural cycles that sustain all life. Each child left with a small tomato plant and detailed instructions for caring for it at home. The success of this first program exceeded all expectations. The children's thank you letters, dictated to Miss Roberts and illustrated with careful drawings, revealed how deeply the experience had affected them. One boy wrote about seeing his first real cow, while a girl described learning that vegetables actually grow in dirt, not in supermarket packages. Word of the Forest Lodge education program spread quickly through local networks. Other schools requested visits, and environmental organizations asked Catherine to speak about her approach to outdoor education. The program's waiting list grew to several months, forcing William and Catherine to consider expanding their offerings. More importantly, the project strengthened their own family's connection to Forest Lodge. The children took pride in showing visitors around their home, developing confidence and communication skills as they explained various features of the property. They began to understand that privilege came with responsibility, and that sharing their advantages with others could multiply the joy rather than diminishing it. The education program also deepened William and Catherine's appreciation for their father's gift. They realized that Charles hadn't simply given them a beautiful property. He had provided them with a platform for meaningful service that aligned perfectly with their values and interests. Forest Lodge was becoming exactly what Charles had envisioned, a place where the royal family could contribute to society while staying grounded in the traditions and landscapes that had shaped their character for generations. As autumn painted the Forest Lodge grounds in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, an unexpected challenge tested William and Catherine's commitment to their new role as stewards of the property. A severe storm system swept across the region, bringing hurricane-force winds and torrential rainfall that threatened to undo months of careful restoration work. The weather warnings came on a Friday evening as the family was enjoying a quiet dinner at the lodge. William received an urgent call from the estate manager, explaining that meteorologists predicted the worst storm in decades would hit their area before dawn. Mrs. Henderson, who had weathered many storms at Forest Lodge, expressed genuine concern about the ancient oak trees surrounding the property, some of which showed signs of age and vulnerability. Catherine immediately began coordinating emergency preparations, drawing on crisis management skills she had developed through years of royal duties. She contacted local authorities to ensure they were aware of the lodge's location and specific vulnerabilities, while William worked with the groundskeeping team to secure outdoor furniture, garden equipment, and anything else that could become dangerous projectiles in high winds. The children, initially excited by the dramatic weather, gradually understood the seriousness of the situation as their parents explained the potential risks. George helped his father board up windows in the most exposed areas of the lodge, while Charlotte and Louis worked with Catherine to move valuable items away from windows and create an emergency kit with flashlights, batteries, and non-perishable food. As the storm intensified during the night, the family huddled together in the lodge's most secure interior room, listening to the frightening sounds of wind howling through the trees and rain hammering against the slate roof. The electricity failed around midnight, plunging them into darkness broken only by flashlight beams and the occasional flicker of lightning through the boarded windows. The most terrifying moment came just before dawn, when they heard the unmistakable sound of a massive tree falling somewhere on the property. The crash was followed by an ominous silence, then the sound of splintering wood and glass. William ventured cautiously toward the front of the lodge, discovering that one of the centuries-old oak trees had fallen across the main driveway, its massive trunk blocking their escape route and its branches reaching nearly to the lodge's front door. As daylight revealed the full extent of the damage, the family confronted a scene of devastation that broke their hearts. Several beautiful trees lay uprooted across the grounds, their ancient root systems exposed like wounded giants. The greenhouse had suffered significant damage, with broken glass scattered across the garden beds Catherine had so carefully tended. Part of the stable roof had been torn away, and debris was scattered everywhere. Mrs. Henderson arrived as soon as the roads became passable, tears streaming down her weathered face as she surveyed the destruction. She had seen Forest Lodge weather many storms over her 3 decades of service, but nothing had prepared her for this level of damage to the landscape she loved so dearly. However, the storm also revealed the strength of the local community's connection to Forest Lodge and the royal family. Before William and Catherine could even begin organizing cleanup efforts, neighbors began arriving with chainsaws, tractors, and willing hands. Local farmers brought equipment to help clear fallen trees, while village residents appeared with thermoses of hot tea and homemade sandwiches for the workers. The children proved remarkably resilient in the face of the crisis. Rather than mourning the destruction, they immediately began planning how they could help rebuild and improve upon what had been lost. Charlotte suggested creating a memorial garden using wood from the fallen oak trees, while George proposed installing better drainage systems to prevent future flood damage. William found himself deeply moved by the community response and his family's resilience. The storm had tested their attachment to Forest Lodge in ways he hadn't anticipated, but rather than weakening their connection to the property, the crisis had strengthened their resolve to preserve and protect it for future generations. The cleanup process took weeks, but it became an opportunity for the family to work alongside local craftspeople and learn traditional restoration techniques. William discovered a talent for chainsaw work, carefully sectioning fallen trees into manageable pieces while preserving the best wood for future projects. Catherine coordinated volunteer efforts, ensuring that workers were fed and organized efficiently. The damaged greenhouse became the focus of an ambitious reconstruction project. Rather than simply replacing what had been lost, Catherine worked with local glass artisans and sustainable building experts to create an improved structure that would be more resilient to future storms while incorporating renewable energy systems and improved growing conditions. Insurance assessors and royal household officials arrived to evaluate the damage and coordinate repairs, but William and Catherine insisted on taking personal responsibility for major decisions about restoration. They refused to simply hand the project over to contractors, understanding that their involvement in rebuilding Forest Lodge would deepen their connection to the property and demonstrate their commitment to the local community. The storm's aftermath also strengthened the educational programs Catherine had established. Children from participating schools followed the restoration process with great interest, learning about weather systems, engineering principles, and community cooperation. Some classes adopted specific restoration projects, raising funds to help replant damaged garden areas or replace educational materials lost in the storm. By winter's arrival, Forest Lodge had not only recovered from the storm damage, but had emerged stronger than before. The rebuilt structures incorporated modern safety features while preserving traditional aesthetics, and the replanted gardens included native species chosen specifically for their resilience to extreme weather. Most importantly, the storm had transformed William and Catherine from property owners into true stewards of Forest Lodge. They had learned that caring for this special place required more than just maintaining its beauty. It demanded resilience, community partnership, and the willingness to adapt while preserving essential character and purpose. 2 years after receiving Forest Lodge, William and Catherine faced their most significant test as its stewards when King Charles announced his intention to visit and personally assess how they had managed the property and its evolving mission. The visit carried deeper meaning than a simple family gathering. It represented Charles's evaluation of whether his son and daughter-in-law had proven worthy of the trust he had placed in them. The announcement came through formal channels, though. Charles had hinted at his plans during a private family dinner at Windsor Castle several weeks earlier. He had listened with growing interest as William and Catherine described their educational programs, conservation efforts, and community partnerships. But he wanted to see the results firsthand before offering his final judgment on their stewardship. Catherine approached the preparation for Charles's visit with characteristic thoroughness, but she was determined not to stage an artificial presentation. Instead, she wanted the king to experience Forest Lodge as it had genuinely evolved under their care As a working educational center, a thriving conservation project, and a beloved family home that had found new purpose without losing its essential character. The visit was scheduled for a warm Saturday in late spring, when the grounds would be at their most beautiful, and the educational programs would be in full swing. Charles would arrive in time to observe a morning session with local school children, tour the rebuilt facilities, and share lunch with the family before exploring the expanded conservation areas that had been developed over the past 2 years. Mrs. Henderson worked tirelessly to ensure every detail reflected the highest standards, though she needn't have worried. The lodge had acquired a lived-in warmth that no amount of artificial preparation could have created. Fresh flowers from Catherine's garden filled the rooms, while children's artwork decorated the walls alongside more formal royal portraits, creating an atmosphere that was both dignified and genuinely welcoming. The morning of the visit dawned clear and bright, with a group of particularly enthusiastic 10-year-olds from a nearby school arriving for their scheduled outdoor education session. Catherine had specifically chosen this group because they included several children who had visited multiple times, allowing them to demonstrate the long-term impact of the Forest Lodge programs. Charles arrived precisely on schedule, stepping out of his modest car with a smile that immediately put the assembled children at ease. He had deliberately chosen to arrive informally, wearing country clothes rather than official regalia, and his relaxed demeanor encouraged the young visitors to treat him as just another interested adult, rather than as an intimidating royal figure. William led his father through the rebuilt stable complex, now transformed into the Learning Lodge, explaining how each space served specific educational purposes. Charles examined the workbenches where children learned traditional crafts, tested the quality of the tools and materials, and asked detailed questions about safety protocols and instructional methods. The highlight of the morning came when 8-year-old Emma, a girl who had participated in programs for over a year, volunteered to show the king her project documenting the life cycle of butterflies in the lodge's meadow areas. Her carefully illustrated notebook, filled with observations and drawings created during multiple visits, demonstrated exactly the kind of deep learning Catherine had hoped to foster. Charles spent considerable time in the rebuilt greenhouse, which had become Catherine's pride and joy. She explained how the new design incorporated sustainable technologies while maintaining the traditional appearance that honored the lodge's heritage. The king was particularly impressed by the rainwater collection system and the solar panels discreetly integrated into the roof design. The conservation areas revealed the full scope of William and Catherine's vision for Forest Lodge. They had worked with environmental scientists to create habitats that supported declining wildlife species while providing excellent outdoor classrooms for visiting students. Charles watched approvingly as children used magnifying glasses to examine pond life and carefully recorded their observations in field notebooks. Lunch was served in the lodge's dining room, where the family gathered around the same wooden table, where Charles had shared countless meals during his own visits over the years. The conversation flowed naturally between family news and detailed discussions about the lodge's expanding mission, with George, Charlotte, and Louis contributing their own perspectives on how the programs had affected their understanding of their family's responsibilities. Charles was particularly moved by a photo album Catherine had prepared, documenting the transformation of Forest Lodge since they had received it. The images showed not just physical improvements, but the faces of hundreds of children who had benefited from their programs, letters from teachers describing lasting impacts on their students, and evidence of the lodge's growing influence on environmental education throughout the region. The afternoon brought the visit's most emotional moment, when Charles toured the memorial garden created from wood salvaged after the devastating storm. William had worked with local craftsmen to create beautiful benches and sculptural elements that honored the fallen trees while providing peaceful spaces for reflection and learning. The garden had become a symbol of resilience and renewal that perfectly captured the lodge's evolving spirit. As evening approached, Charles found himself in his former study, now clearly William's domain, but still containing the books and personal touches that reflected decades of royal family history. The transition felt natural and appropriate, with new elements blending seamlessly with cherished traditions. The king's final assessment came during a private conversation with William and Catherine, after the children had gone to bed. Charles, expressed his profound satisfaction with everything he had observed, praising their creativity, dedication, and wisdom in expanding the lodge's mission while preserving its essential character. More importantly, he acknowledged that they had transformed his gift into something far more valuable than he had originally envisioned. Charles recognized that Forest Lodge had become a model for how royal properties could serve broader public purposes without losing their private family function. The success of their stewardship had implications far beyond this single property, suggesting new possibilities for the monarchy's relationship with the British countryside and its educational mission. The visit concluded with Charles officially endorsing William and Catherine's plans for further expansion of the Forest Lodge programs, including their proposal to create a network of similar educational centers at other royal properties. His approval represented more than family pride. It signaled his confidence that the next generation of royals truly understood their role as stewards of Britain's natural and cultural heritage. 5 years had passed since King Charles first awarded Forest Lodge to William and Catherine, and the property had evolved into something far beyond what anyone had originally imagined. What began as a simple transfer of royal property had become a groundbreaking model for how the monarchy could serve society while maintaining its essential traditions and character. The success of the Forest Lodge educational programs had attracted international attention, with delegations from other countries visiting to study their approach to environmental education and community engagement. Catherine had been invited to speak at conferences across Europe about outdoor learning, while William had become a respected voice in conservation circles, regularly consulting with environmental organizations about sustainable land management practices. The children, now older and more involved in the lodge's mission, had developed into confident young people who understood both their privileges and their responsibilities. George, approaching his teenage years, had become an accomplished naturalist who could identify dozens of bird species and explain complex ecological relationships to visiting school groups. His leadership skills were evident as he organized activities for younger children and helped his parents coordinate large events. Charlotte had discovered a talent for scientific illustration, creating detailed drawings of plants and animals that were now used in educational materials distributed to schools throughout the region. Her artwork decorated the walls of the Learning Lodge, and she had begun selling prints to raise money for conservation projects, demonstrating an entrepreneurial spirit that impressed everyone who worked with her. Louis, still the most energetic of the 3 children, had channeled his enthusiasm into hands-on conservation work. He could build bird boxes, maintain garden beds, and operate tools with skill that amazed adult visitors. His infectious excitement about nature had made him a favorite among younger visiting children, who responded to his genuine enthusiasm and patient teaching style. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 70s but still energetic, had become something of a legend among the families who participated in Forest Lodge programs. Children who had visited years earlier would return as teenagers, eager to show their younger siblings around the property and reconnect with the woman who had taught them to identify wildflowers and showed them where to find the best blackberries. The physical transformation of Forest Lodge was equally impressive. The grounds now included specialized areas for different types of learning, a woodland classroom with amphitheater seating carved into a natural hillside, a traditional craft workshop where children learned woodworking and pottery, and an expanded organic garden that supplied vegetables for the lodge's kitchen while demonstrating sustainable growing techniques. The rebuilt greenhouse had become a year-round center for horticultural education, where children could observe plant growth in controlled conditions and learn about different climates and growing zones. Catherine had worked with botanists to create displays showing how climate change was affecting native British plants, helping young visitors understand environmental challenges in concrete, observable terms. Perhaps most significantly, the Forest Lodge model had been replicated at 3 other royal properties, creating a network of educational centers that served thousands of children annually. Each location had its own character and specialized programs, but all shared the same philosophy of hands-on learning and environmental stewardship that William and Catherine had pioneered. The financial sustainability of the programs had exceeded all expectations. Corporate sponsors had eagerly supported the initiative, recognizing both its educational value and its positive association with the royal family. School districts budgeted specifically for Forest Lodge visits, considering them essential rather than optional experiences for their students. More importantly, follow-up studies had documented lasting impacts on children who participated in the programs. Teachers reported that students who visited Forest Lodge showed improved academic performance, greater environmental awareness, and enhanced confidence in outdoor settings. Many former participants had chosen to study environmental science or related fields, directly crediting their Forest Lodge experiences for inspiring their career choices. The success had also strengthened William and Catherine's marriage and their relationship with their own children. Working together on meaningful projects had deepened their partnership, while the shared mission had given their family life additional purpose beyond their royal duties. The lodge had become a place where they could be simultaneously public servants and private family members. Charles visited Forest Lodge regularly now, often bringing international guests who wanted to understand how traditional monarchies could adapt to modern challenges while preserving their essential character. He took evident pride in explaining how his son and daughter-in-law had transformed his gift into something that benefited thousands of people while maintaining the property's role as a royal family sanctuary. The lodge's guest book, now filled with entries from children, teachers, international visitors, and dignitaries, told the story of its transformation through hundreds of different perspectives. A child's drawing of a red squirrel appeared next to a formal thank you note from a foreign minister, while a teacher's detailed reflection on her students' learning was followed by a conservation scientist's technical observations about wildlife habitat restoration. As William and Catherine looked toward the future, they could see endless possibilities for expanding Forest Lodge's mission. Plans were already underway for a research center, where university students could study sustainable agriculture and wildlife conservation, while discussions had begun about creating international exchange programs that would bring young people from around the world to learn about British environmental traditions. The anniversary of King Charles's original gift had become an annual celebration at Forest Lodge, bringing together past participants, current supporters, and local community members for a day of reflection and planning. This year's event attracted over 300 people, from former students now starting their own careers to government officials interested in replicating the model in other contexts. Standing in the garden where it all began, surrounded by the flourishing community that had grown around Forest Lodge, William and Catherine could hardly recognize the quiet retreat that Charles had given them 5 years earlier. They had honored his trust by preserving everything that made the property special while transforming it into something that served a much larger purpose. Forest Lodge had become proof that the monarchy could evolve and adapt while maintaining its core values, demonstrating that privilege and responsibility could work together to create positive change that benefited everyone involved. The little hunting lodge in the woods had become a beacon of hope for how tradition and innovation could combine to build a better future for generations to come.